Hi, this screencast is about homeostasis. So I'd like to take you through a tour of homeostasis. Um, I think this image does a good job of giving an overview. So you can imagine in homeostasis, where the body's trying to maintain stability, perhaps trying to keep the amount of water within a narrow range, the amount of salts, amount of sugars in the blood, etc., temperature. So in order to do that, there has to be a set point. And if the conditions change from that set point, then certain actions can take place. So we'll start over here. We'll say that something has changed. So maybe it's the temperature or the amount of sugar in the blood, and it's changed from a set point. And so we'll need to detect that change. So there'll be some part of the body that's going to detect or sense this change. And then it will initiate sort of corrective measures. And hopefully, then our conditions go back to normal or back to our set point. If that happens, then of course, we'll have to turn off those corrective measures since conditions are back to normal. And perhaps sometime in the future, conditions will change in the body again, and then we'll have to detect that change, correct that change over and over and over again. I think this image does a really nice job of giving an analogy. And we saw this image in our pogo activity. So if we look at the top, this is basically how we maintain a stable internal temperature inside a home. So the person lives in the home will decide on a set point, the temperature that's comfortable for that person. And you can see in this example that the temperature is actually below the set point. And so there'll be in the control center some kind of sensor that's going to detect the temperature. And since the temperature is not at the set point, then we'll have to activate our corrective measures. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll turn on the heater, which will then, of course, produce heat, which will increase the temperature of the room and hopefully get it back to our set point. And then, of course, you could imagine that if the temperature were to go above the set point, then perhaps we can turn on other processes, like maybe turn on an AC, and that will keep the temperature at the set point. So in the body, there are certain adaptations that allow us to maintain this stable temperature, keep our temperature at a certain set point. So if our temperature were to go above the set point, then there are a few adaptations we can do. One adaptation is that we have the ability to open or to enlarge our arteries, or arterioles, I should say. And what happens is that as this warm blood is going towards the skin, the heat from the blood escapes those blood vessels, which will then, decrease the blood temperature, which will, of course, decrease our internal temperature. Then, of course, we know about sweating. Basically, what happens with sweating is that as we release this warm water out of our body, when it evaporates, it basically brings along energy or heat, which escapes our body. Then, of course, in animals with fur and a lot of hair, what we can do is we can flatten the hair, and that allows heat to escape as well. Perhaps not as useful in humans, but definitely useful in other organisms. Then let's say the temperature goes below our set point. Then we can do the opposite with our arterioles, our blood vessels. We can constrict our blood vessels, which will make them get smaller, and it'll have the opposite effect. So that reduces blood flow to the skin, which prevents the heat from escaping, and that'll keep our core temperature warm. And you're probably aware of shivering. And basically what happens in shivering is whenever we expend energy by, for example, using our muscles, basically heat is produced as a byproduct of those chemical and cellular processes. So we have a neat adaptation of shivering, which is this rapid movement of our muscles, and then the byproduct of those processes that produces heat, which will then keep our body warm. And then again, for animals with fur, we can make our hair stand up, and what that does is that traps warm air to our body, which will keep us warm. I think here's an appropriate point to pause the video. Here's some vocabulary that I want you to be familiar with, commit to memory. So why don't you pause the video, jot down these words and definitions, and then you can move on to the next slide once you've done that. Now that we understand the process of homeostasis, I thought we'd use a real example. We know of the adaptations for keeping our temperature stable, and we know the vocabulary. So I thought it'd be good to bring all those pieces together. So we'll start here in the middle with a set point. So we have a internal set point for body temperature, which is about 36 degrees Celsius. And then, so of course, some corrective measures can be taken if our temperature goes below that set point, and then different measures will take place if our temperature goes above. So if we start at the temperature dropping, let's say there's something in the environment, like it gets cold outside. So then what that'll do is that, of course, will lower our blood temperature. And then this stimulus, the dropping blood temperature, is going to be detected by our control center, which is a part in the brain that's going to detect this temperature change. So then it's going to send messages to two effectors. One effector are the blood vessels that we talked about, and of course they're going to constrict, prevent blood from going to our skin, which would then keep the warm blood in our body. And then, of course, we know our skeletal muscles are going to shiver, and so that's their response. So blood vessels, their response, constrict. Muscles, their response is to shiver, and of course, both of these will increase the internal temperature of our body. Now, let's suppose that works and maybe it shoots above the set point, temperature goes above. So now our blood temperature is above the set point, which is our stimulus. Then we have our control center, the brain, that's going to sense this temperature change. Then it's going to send messages to effectors. One effector, the sweat gland, and another effector, of course, blood vessels. And then the effectors are going to respond. So one response from the sweat glands or the produced sweat, which will then decrease our temperature. And then our blood vessels, their response is to open, to dilate, and that would hopefully decrease our temperature. So I thought I'd go through another example of homeostasis in the body, and this time we'll talk about blood sugar. So, as you might have inferred, our blood sugar can drop below the set point, or it could go above the set point. So again, if we go below the set point, we'll have a different control center, the pancreas, and that will sense the drop in blood sugar, and then it will release a chemical message, a hormone, glucagon, and that chemical message is going to be received by effectors. One effector is the liver, which will then release stored sugar into the blood, raising the blood sugar level. It'll also trigger hunger, which will hopefully get us to grab a meal, which will increase our blood sugar levels. Now, let's say our blood sugar levels go above the set point. Again, we have this control center, the pancreas, sensing this change. It's going to release a chemical message called insulin. You probably have heard of insulin in the context of diabetics. We'll come back to that in a sec. So then this insulin is going to be received by effectors. One effector is the liver, which would then do the opposite, which will store sugar, take it out of the blood, which will then decrease the blood sugar. It'll also reduce our appetite, which will hopefully prevent us from getting a meal, and then eventually our blood sugar levels will drop. Other effectors like body cells might take sugar out of the blood, which will decrease the blood sugar levels. As I'm putting the pieces together, take a moment to look at this slide to think about, why are body cells and liver is considered effectors? Why is the drop in blood sugar considered a stimulus? Why is the liver considered an effector? Why are these considered responses? Just to make sure you understand the vocabulary. The second thing I want you to also think about is this issue of insulin. I mentioned that insulin, its job, it is a hormone, which will then, send messages to the liver and body cells to basically store sugar, take it out of the blood, decreasing our blood sugar levels. So people with diabetes, they actually take insulin as medication, as treatment. And what happens is that a number of things can be wrong with them, but it's basically something about their insulin. So either they don't produce enough insulin, or the cells that receive the insulin, they're not getting, they're not receiving the message as well. So there are a couple of things that could be wrong. But the idea is that if they don't produce insulin, then of course they're going to have high blood sugar, right? Because the insulin is the thing that's going to drop the blood sugar. So if there's no insulin, then our blood sugar levels just keep on increasing. So we have to do something to restore the blood sugar levels, and introducing insulin could prove to be effective. Now, as I finish up, I just want to point out we talked about temperature and we talked about blood sugar levels. But there are many other things that we have to keep in balance. So, there's this whole list of things that have particular set points and have homeostatic processes that are going to keep those conditions stable. Thank you.